Everybody, my name is John Clese. Oh, and we've got recording in progress. Welcome, everybody. My name is John Clese, and you are here for our webinar, Avoid an Office Graveyard, How to Redesign Your Space with Purpose. I'm super excited that you could all be here today. As you may know, A Church Consulting works with organizations on developing best practices for remote and hybrid organizations. And we thought it would be very interesting today to talk about space. Because space, of course, is becoming such a central part of the future of work. And actually, how are we going to end up using our spaces if we have them? And sort of what role does the office have in the future? And so for that, I already said who we are. And for that, we're super excited to bring on Colleen Scott. Colleen is a principal and project executive for CCS Project Management, and they are basically space planners as well as helping organizations through the entire transformation as they're renovating their spaces. Anybody that's done any work on your home, that certainly is no small task at all, I am sure, when it comes to these office spaces. So Colleen, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming today.
Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. And I'm actually going to turn off this. I do want to let everybody know we do have some visuals, but I'm going to stop my share for now so that I can take a look at Colleen. And then once we get to some visuals, we'll bring them back on. So she's very glad that she brought some stuff for us to share. So Colleen, all right, I've wanted to talk to you since like last fall, and we were finally able to schedule you. So I'm super excited that we've been able to do that. So one of the things that we noticed when we've been working with organizations when we were in the pandemic and coming out was just how fast everybody decided that the 2 to 3 days mandatory in the office was what was going to work. And I think it's fair to say that our offices, for the most part, still feel like ghost towns, and that really the return to work for many organizations really has been pretty much of a flop, right? It's been hard to grab people to get into the office. They're just not doing it. So my question to you is, when an organization first, when they first call you, have they already tried to bring people back in and they're calling you, or do some of these people just have like amazing foresight into figuring out their spaces?
It's a combination of both. Some people have tried unsuccessfully to get folks to return to the office by setting arbitrary rules like Tuesday, Thursday, or picking a day. And some haven't. Some are trying to figure out what their plans are. And obviously the space planning component and how the floor lays out and how much space you need ties to your HR policy and that return to work strategy.
And so when they what is their main goal when they come to you? What do they say?
The office has become an attractor. I had a meeting this week with the company. They're looking at it as a recruitment tool to be able to attract and retain young talent. And I think what we've seen is there's been a shift in what people are coming to the office primarily to do, where pre-COVID, it was a lot of heads down work and people were working individually. And now we see people are coming to the office because they want to see their peers and they want to collaborate. They know that they can work heads down alone at home the way that they've been doing. So we're seeing changes in how the spaces lay out to support additional collaboration and additional informal and formal meetings and get-togethers in the office.
So would you say that's one of the biggest changes from pre-COVID is? What would that be?
It's a big change, and it's probably a long-term, more permanent change. Things have come in cycles during my career. We had huge offices when I started, and then it was like, how small can we make things? And COVID has sort of reversed that pattern where things are more generously sized. I think we all got used to having a little bit more personal space around us and having a little bit more distance between us. A lot of that like tight benching desk setup that we did before, we've pulled a lot of those out over the last 2 years.
So you mean and actually I should say before I go on, for everybody, please feel free to put questions into the chat. We do have some time for questions at the end. And I think that Molly's already posted that if you're on here with a group and you want to anonymously say something, feel free to go ahead and do that. So Colleen, with the back-to-back desks and things that we used to, so are we saying that finally the cubicle is dead? Is it?
We feel like it's definitely dying, especially with people not being in the office 5 days. A lot of companies have gone to not dedicated desking, and that's part of an HR policy that says if you're in the office, and each company has their own threshold, but usually it's like 4 or 5 days a week. If you're not there that much, then you don't necessarily get a dedicated office. And I think that people are willing to make that trade-off in order to have better functioning space in the office when they're there, to be able to do exactly this format of meeting. And also really just to get back in the office and see their peers. So.
And is that, so the lack of assigned desks, like when you're working with somebody and you're thinking about that, or you propose that, does that come across as kind of radical for people still to even contemplate not assigning desks to their staff?
It really does come across as radical, which is a little bit crazy when you think about the expense in terms of rent layout for not having people there all the time. I think, salaries are normally the #1 expense and rent is normally #2. So the two go hand in hand, but to us, it doesn't make sense to have dedicated spaces to people that are not in the office all the time. So.
Right. Interesting. And so, when we were talking, when we were preparing for this webinar, it was reminding me that, we used to go into the office because we had better, it was a better setup there, right? We had 2 screens, maybe people had 3 screens. The technology seemed better. Like, it was just better. We went in the office, and at home we just sort of had our laptop. And now, after the pandemic, for those that have sort of settled into this, we've got 2 or 3 screens at home. We've got, I took one of my guest rooms and now it's my office. I figured I work every day, but I have guests like 9 days a year. So we all made ourselves more comfortable. We got comfy chairs and stuff. So do you think part of the space now is actually competing with the comfort of home?
Very much so. And one of the things that we've been doing is designing a variety of spaces within the office where you can sit and work on a couch, or you can sit and work in a low chair, you can sit and work at a bar in the kitchen, just to give you a variety of spaces.
Right. So it's not, what is the new slogan? Is it sort of worth my commute to come in, whether that be for the work that I'm going to do in the office, or I would imagine also just the space, like who wants an uncomfortable space?
Yes. Yeah, technology is a big challenge for many organizations where they're trying to get people back in the office and they're not set up for Zoom meetings or hybrid meetings.
Right.
Really, other than individual laptops, because then there's a big complaint. Why did we come to the office and then just sit in a room by ourselves on our laptops?
Right. And half of my meetings are, they got the Zoom on the other end doing that. So we have, and I'm going to bring over, thank you for all gas prices. I'm going to bring over these chats so I can see them on this other screen. Yeah, gas prices for sure. And somebody wrote, hooray, death to the cubicle. Yeah, I think that is just so funny when you think about that, right? Especially when you're first out of school. I thought you made it. You were in an office with cubicles. And then actually sort of those cubicles went away. And then it really became like, I'm sure when you go in some of these spaces, it was like long tables with just endless people sitting next to each other, right? And maybe if you were lucky, you had a divider from the people in front of you. But is that fairly common still when you go into some of these firms?
The only place that we're seeing that sort of benching style stay are in the architecture and engineering firms. So, but I think it's also a factor, there's a cycle with the leasing process where when they sign a new lease, they get funds to be able to do improvements. So if you're in the middle of your lease and you're trying to pay for office changes or technology changes, it's a little bit more difficult because you're paying for that out of cash flow as opposed to having a landlord fund it. So.
Right. And so what are some of the must-haves that, like, if somebody's on here right now and they haven't really started, and we've got some pictures in a moment, but if they haven't started anything, what are some of, at least on your list of the must-haves that you sort of bring to your clients?
In terms of a variety of collaborative spaces, it's different size conference rooms. I think we've gone into a lot of companies in the last 18 months where they had, 2 or maybe 3 conference rooms, and it's just not enough anymore because of, again, this format of Zoom or hybrid meeting. And we're seeing the need for different conference room sizes. Even, a 2-person, 3-person sort of Zoom room style, smaller room where somebody can go in and shut the door and not be worried that they're disturbing all of their peers sitting in the open office. And then the sort of hybrid format where we have 6 or 8 people in the office, but there are still people remotely. I think that's actually one of the nice things that COVID did, was sort of level the playing field between people that are always in and people that maybe sometimes worked from out of town. So we're, even for board meetings, we're getting requests to have things set up so that it's leveling the playing field between the board members. And somebody said gas savings, but people used to fly to board meetings and now they're doing it this way. So there is a real carbon footprint savings on the back end of that too.
Interesting. Well, we're big, outside of sort of all staff gatherings, we're a big believer here at a church that the return to the office and the future work is really, it's not only is your office really got to have a purpose, but it's really team led. And so what we're finding is that's really been for operationally and for teams and culture and getting work done and for bonding, it's about how your team comes into the office, not necessarily worrying about whether it's 2 to 3 days a week in the office, but my team, we've decided we're coming in, or these 2 teams are coming in because we're going to collaborate on a kickoff of a project or something like that. Are you seeing some of that with the team led? And in fact, how do you accommodate that sort of in the spaces? Like, does that change a little bit the way you think about the space?
A little bit. I mean, I think team led is definitely the best approach because the team leader then is getting their staff energized about what the plan is, and hopefully getting the most successful plans. They get staff buy-in. They don't just say, here's what we're going to do. So that sort of coming up with how the team works best. We've seen it go both ways in terms of levels of success. I think the least successful return to the offices are when somebody makes a decision and sets a date and doesn't check with everybody. That's often a little awkward, but definitely working with management to come up with a plan in terms of staff. And then taking it a step further, when the managers actually cooperate and talk about who's going to be in when, we've seen a couple of groups where everybody's in the office on Tuesday, and they've actually turned it into fun. They bring in food and there's a happy hour after. They want to at least take advantage of the day that everybody's there. So
we've heard that too. It was funny. We were talking to a client the other day and they were saying that in their full day, they are team led, but in the day that they bring people back, which I believe was a Monday, they look at that as basically, that is a non-work day. It is literally just for socializing and getting to know sort of across teams. And I think one of the things we want to mention, if I haven't already, is that, most studies show, and there's a new one that just came out from Microsoft. Again, most people are coming into the office for socialization first, right? And then bonding with their team second. So it's really about, which then of course I think, well, no wonder we never got any work done at the office, because everybody was really there to socialize first and, oh yeah, I got to do this job that allows me to do all the socialization. But it's interesting because if you're not thinking about that first, right? If you're thinking it's the heads down on the desk, you are sort of missing the main point of the socialization of which, of why people want to go in there in the first place. We have a couple of questions here, and I'm going to scroll back a little bit because somebody had mentioned any suggestions for hoteling and shared space. And I had that on my list of questions for you because we have heard not just from one client, but that one of the problems in the setup, everybody's like, oh, we're gonna do hoteling spaces and people can reserve them, is that the spaces that people are setting up are really loud. And it's not, you're back to back. So everybody kind of thought, oh, this is cool, you can reserve a space, but that doesn't seem to be working either. And there seems to be a bit of a backlash against that, the way that you set up a hoteling space. So any suggestions for that?
We have seen there are software programs available that help track and reserve those. Some of the larger companies like Deloitte that have been doing this hot desking forever have it down to a science, and we try to extrapolate those software programs and integrate them with how their office already works. Like a lot of it can be done in Outlook. And then like for conference rooms, we call them room schedulers, where we put on the outside of the office, it's a digital display, and you can book that through Outlook and it updates who's in there. So there's different sort of hardware and software type of, we normally purchase it through an audio visual vendor to be able to track things. But no, not everyone uses Outlook. Yeah, we do have folks that use Google, and Gmail. So
it also sounds like, to that hoteling space though, setting it up to that bench style is not a good way, because if you've got 3 people that have reserved it and somebody's on the phone, again, back to the, well, why did I even come in?
yes.
So do you recommend more like smaller spaces for people to be able to do some of that hoteling? Perhaps they, because they're not always on there and need to be away from a crowd. But many little, mini conference rooms, I guess you'd call them, or Zoom spaces, I guess, right?
Yes, the Zoom rooms, the smaller spaces, 2 or 3 people, those are very popular right now. And I think that makes the return to office a little bit smoother, because you can go someplace quiet and have a conversation. We think that the hoteling sort of hot desking, where you're benching people side by side, is only a good situation for people that don't come in all the time. Because it's just not enough to want to go all the way to the office for a 5-foot section of plastic laminate table. So
good.
I mean, to be frank,
Yeah.
so there's some really basic things we've seen work very successfully to get people back to the office. Like, I think food is number 1. So, which even in a law firm, they used to serve lunch all the time. Now they're doing it, they pick a day and they have a catered lunch. And that's part of how they've been trying to get people back to the office. It doesn't have to be that fancy. We've seen La Croix and muffins or bagels or anything, but again, trying to socialize, get people more to socialize. So.
Fits with the socialization theme. I was listening to somebody the other day, and they're team led in terms of the return to the office, but what they were saying surprised them was they forget that even though you're bringing in the team to do work and collaborative work, even throughout the day, though, there's other partners and vendors or clients that they need to speak with throughout the day. So they said as many, quote, Zoom rooms as they thought that they needed for individuals to be able to go on a Zoom call, it wasn't enough, because they forgot that still had to happen, even though while you're accommodating that team or two in larger spaces. Does that something that you would agree with?
I would agree. I mean, we're seeing a much higher ratio of small conference rooms on a floor plan these days. So again, for that reason. So,
well, what I would like to do, I'm going to pause for a second, and I'm going to bring up some of the visuals that you brought to us. If everybody just bears with me for a moment, and thank you everybody for your questions. I really appreciate it. Share my screen here, and let me know if everybody can see my screen.
Yes.
You look at can you see my big screen? Hopefully.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So let's look at this before picture of this floor plan that you have here, and hopefully everybody you can see that that's big enough. So why don't you walk us through, and I can use my pointer, Colleen, you can sort of tell us, what are we looking at all around the perimeter of this space here?
Sure. So this is a before floor plan of a very traditional, I would say, for the last 10 years office layout where it's all offices at the perimeter. And then they put the workstations in two big groupings.
So are these the workstations here? Were these the
Yes,
big?
those open
Okay.
areas have
Okay.
had cubicles in them.
Okay.
But again, keeping this building actually has windows on 4 sides, and they took all of them they took all the light for the offices. So that's
It's always nice. Let's give the executives and higher ups all the light for the day so they can be creative, but then let's put everybody else in the center of the room, right?
yes.
Nice thinking. Okay.
Yeah. And then they
Anything
have
else?
a variety of sort of traditional conference room, kitchen, workroom, but the space, frankly, they knew it. It was depressing. They and
Oh,
they
I see. Here's their main conference room, right? So they have a
yes,
large conference room and they had a small conference room, right?
yes,
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And so that's pretty typical, I'm imagining, of what you see when you go into some spaces.
yes.
Yeah. All right. So let's do the next. So this is the after. Looks way different to me. I still see some offices along the wall, but talk to us about what some of those changes are that we're looking at here.
So we put the conference rooms on the perimeter because those are shared spaces. So we like to share the best space, which is normally daylighted space. And then there's a variety of rooms. So there's 4 people conference rooms. There are some 2 people Zoom rooms with windows. And then some of these larger spaces with 6 or 8 people, but they see this floor plan being very fluid. So while there are workstations on the floor plan, they have a beautiful new kitchen with a variety of spaces to sit. They have
And that's right here. And I know we've got some pictures of that. That's right here. Is this the whole big?
yes.
So that's now taking center stage in the office.
Again, we're seeing it as a collaborative zone. So if you come into the office, the first thing that you want to see are your peers. That's hopefully why you're there. So let's put the coffee at the front so that that's what people see when they come in. And that everybody misses that energy, but it's hard on a floor plan, especially when there's different kitchens sort of tucked in corners. We found this big central kitchen. It's like a house. People gather.
No matter how big your kitchen is, they stand next to your stove while you're cooking. Right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I just realized, okay. So you put all that, and then now where's the are these the elevator banks here? So people actually walk off and come right into the space. Okay, and I see some open spaces here. What is this room here that's behind the kitchen? Is this like
That's
storage?
a workroom with the coffee machines.
Okay, great. So what I love too is, and I don't know if this is what we call Zoom rooms, is I see a ton of these little like one chair and a table, one chair and a table, one chair and 2. So
those are Zoom rooms. Yes.
Okay. Really, wow, what a difference in terms of all the spacing.
Well,
All right,
the other, I think what other big change is that all of these perimeter offices are large enough. They have a table in the office as well. So if that office is vacant and you need to take a call and you sit at a workstation, they have a policy that says any open office, you can go in and you can sit down and use the table, which I highly approve of.
Oh, right, because now all these become 2-person conference rooms too, or a single person. Now, Colleen, are these, I don't know if this organization is so telling, but in these office spaces like this, is this also something that you're finding organizations are letting people reserve? So they can come in, like, so, because is there any of this that's assigned to anybody, or are these all unassigned?
They haven't formally designated anything yet because they're still in their who's in the office on what days, and there's not enough people there to need to define it yet. But they're working on a policy for after the first of the year. So
I was listening to somebody the other day, and they were talking about when they repurposed the space. And they had little mini, like almost like a townhouse space they were doing in cities with different floor stuff. And they had some desks in there, and that when they first reopened the space, people still went to the desk right away, because that's what they're saying used to. And the first they were like, really, seriously, we're spending all this time, and everybody went to the desk. But then after a couple of days, it took people a while to realize, no, I can actually go and plop down on the sofa, and that's where I'm hanging for the next 3 hours while I do something or write something. But that we're so conditioned to think that we've got to have our space when we go in, that it was uncomfortable almost the first day that they reopened the office, for people to feel that way, to come in and have all these options, right?
It is a transition.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of pieces of that with recommuting and getting to the office too, so.
And what about these? So these over here, these look like a little bit more of the traditional spaces, right? I've got 2 chairs
Yes.
here and 4 here and 2 over here, but they're still off in a section by themselves.
Yes.
So what is the client thinking here with these? Are these like, focus spaces, or just got 6 people in? Or just
Really just a variety of spaces. So if you wanted to sit with your team by the window, or you want to sit inboard because you want to be closer to one of those conference rooms, it was really just to give people options. Barbara's asking a question.
Yeah, so we have this question. So any suggestions I handle reducing the number of dedicated workstations for more conference rooms or lounge areas, but then you designate a few days a year when everyone must be in? How does that work? Yeah, so that was a question, good question, from Anonymous. That was a question that I have, because what we're finding in this team-led environment is that it's still incredibly important, at least once or twice a year, for all staff to come in. Some people are doing all staff meetings all the time, but when you have big groups that are, if you're a national or global company, they're really embracing that, meeting 3 or 4 days a year, twice a year, is more than enough to bring that cohesion to staff and then carry on that cohesion digitally. So in spaces like this, are you finding that people are flexing for those really sort of big events, or are they opting to just do that offsite? Or like, can a space like this be reconfigured if they were going to bring everybody in for a 3-day conference? Is it flexible?
So it is flexible, and flexibility is one of the keys with planning any project, just to be able to have different options. But their large conference room up against the window line, the partition's actually foldable. So those rooms can open, to combine into one room, and then they basically sit chairs more of a theater style in rows.
Gotcha.
And I think we got 40 something people in there. But it's also part of why they've left the middle of the floor with the kitchen/reception so open, is so that they can have a gathering of most of the staff. So at least this group in particular, that not all of the staff are in DC, so they're a national nonprofit. So I would say it would be very rare that all of these seats would be filled. But it really just depends per organization how many people you're planning to accommodate.
And one of the things that you say too, which I think is a good point, I know there was a comment here about budget, is it's expensive, right, to redo spaces. But at the same time, everyone's telling office folks that they should be very iterative in the process, and that once again, you're not going to get it right all the time. So if you don't have like Deloitte and some of these other big companies that really can spend a ton of money all the time, if they don't get it right, what would sort of be the things that you would have people do first that you think will probably have some good staying power?
Really, the Zoom rooms is the #1 focus. And this involved a fair amount of construction, this project, but a standard size office can convert fairly easily to a functioning Zoom room for 4 people. And that's really just a furniture change normally, so there's not a whole lot involved. what else have I seen? I mean, a lot of this is furniture solutions. I saw there was a question about large cubicle sizes. We actually have a project that we're looking at now where they have like 8 foot by 12 foot, 6 foot high walled cubicle, like very old fashioned, and we're trying to get them to go to more of an open plan system where at least when if you're sitting, you have privacy. If you're standing, you can see around.
Yeah,
Reducing,
you're not.
yeah.
So question here, sorry, I meant reducing size of full office and eliminating the sea of cubicles. So what about moving from a large cubicle to a smaller footprint? I meant reducing size of full office.
Yeah, we
Oh,
haven't seen anybody get rid of the cubicles in their entirety because, like somebody said, you need a place for people to sit when there is the majority of the office population in the office and they're not in meetings. So,
and I've seen too, if you can't afford things that are new, at least do some sort of fabric covering so they're not gray and light blue, right? I mean, because that's just so uninspiring to come in and see that. So I've seen a lot more color coming into all of these spaces. As you can see in my office, I like a little pop of color. Are you seeing that too? Are you seeing more color come in, even if we've got to, because lots of people can afford to paint, right? Just doing anything to make the space a little bit more vibrant.
yes, color, natural daylight, and then the other thing that's very popular is something plant wise, either a green wall or a living wall or a moss wall. Or
Which I
plant
think we have, right, on one, I think, let's see
one
if
of the
that's the
pictures.
next. Oh, not yet. All right, so here we go. So this is the kitchen, and I love this.
The
Everybody can look at this.
before kitchen, the uninspiring before kitchen.
And I think pretty much it's safe to say we have all had a kitchen that looked like this in the workspaces, and probably a lot of us still do. So this is the before. Yeah, not that exciting, but we got 2 microwaves, right? So that's kind of nice. And it also looks like it's off in the corner, right? It's not in the center. It's not in the center of anything at all. And then, so this is the before. I love this. I always wanted to do before after show. And then we've got, and if I could do it, let's see here. And then this is the after, right? Whoops, you see that? Look at that. That's really, now that is this the green wall that you're talking about here?
Green wall, it's a moss wall. It was important, this is Ocean Conservancy, so it was important for them to have something living in the space, and the blue theme and the waves on the ceiling all tie into they wanted it to feel inspiring when they came in. And this big pantry on the left side is what you see if you get past the reception desk. The elevators are just to the right of that picture.
So this literally is when you walk into their office now. This is what you see.
Yes, that is what you see.
Wow, that's
So,
beautiful. And this looks like you can cook, or they can cater out of it, and then people can also sit at a bar, right?
Sit at the bar or sit at the banquette seats, at the tables around the perimeter. But yeah, again, building a social space so that it's a beautiful kitchen. It would be a great place to just sit and talk with your colleagues.
Oh yeah, I mean, all of a kitchen like that. Now, is this over here on the right with the green wall? Is this part of the kitchen too? Is
Yes,
this in the
it's
back?
just on the side. It's sort of behind us in the picture on the left.
So let's do this again. Let's see. Inspired to come in the office? No. Oh my God, yes, would love that, right? No doubt about it. I really love it. That's really good. Great job on that one. We have another, somebody wrote, wow. Thank you, Megan. Yeah, it is wow. I was staring at that a bit this morning. So the next picture we have is the conference room. So this is the old, now this is this one of the ones that has the walls now? So this is the before, yes, right? Obviously. And then this is the after.
The after is on the right, and John and I were talking about this. The thing that you can't see on the right is all the technology is hidden. So there are cameras and speakers in the room, and you can have a meeting in a Zoom format with the camera that tracks to whoever's speaking. It was important, again, for them to be able to do that in their own space. for a board size meeting. So
Now, was this the same space they had, or is this in a completely reconfigured part of the? So
it
that
is
you
in
have,
a new space. We push the conference room to the window line. Again, one of our general focuses is to give the best space to the most people. So we like to spread the natural light around as much as people will let us. So we'd always.
and I like that. It's interesting with the U shape. And I know some of us have it, some of us don't. But I was watching something the other day where they were saying, they spent the money to put everything at the front of the room, right, and the monitors and everything. So it really felt like you were part with the people that were not in the office. But then when they realized, and it was kind of theater sitting, but then they realized that people in the meeting wanted to talk to the people behind them. Again, one of these things that got really far along, and then they started using it. It's like, well, wait a minute, this doesn't really actually work for everybody that's on premise. Yes, I see somebody there up on the screen, but I got to turn around to the person behind me. So I think back to what you said in terms of that flexibility, right? Because it looks like this can be maneuvered at 10 ways to Sunday, right? In this
Exactly.
room.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
the tables can be fully removed from that room by normal people, so it doesn't require a facilities department.
well, and you know what I think is funny too about this? If you look at the before, again, I'm old, but when you would go into a conference room and see that on the table, you're like, oh, that's really nice. Look, I could just plug right into the, right? I mean, that was kind of like, it wasn't so long ago that most people never even had that, right? The most you had was a star phone that sat in the middle of the conference room table, and you think, oh yeah, let's use that room. That's got the star phone. We have a question here. Our team loves having at least 2 monitors. How do you set that up in the after layout like the one you planned? It's not easy to hang out and work in a space or in a couch that's not set up for that, where you can only work on a laptop. Everyone's home has at least 2 monitors. So I think I'm going to go back to the space we have here. So yeah, so are there monitors that are fixed in these spaces, Colleen?
So you can't, it's not really shown on these drawings, but each of these desks could have 2 monitors. So, and this group did not opt for that, but we have had other groups just say put dual monitors in every workstation so that people, like John said, have better technology in the office than they do at home. It's another reason I can work well here. So.
Because you really are competing with the comfort of home, right? Exactly what everybody's been telling everyone.
Very much, yes.
All right, so let me go back because I think we have another. So there's the conference room, and now we've got some spaces. So these look like 2 different spaces. So why don't you talk to us about the one on the left first?
Yeah, the pictures aren't the best because they are not the professional photos from the end, but these are both Zoom type of rooms. So the one on the left, that would be, you bring your monitor in and you sit, that could be a hoteling office or a Zoom room. And the one on the right has a low table, just again, to give a variety of seating options and spaces. Some people really like those low tables for more informal team conversations, but you can still connect to the screen on the wall in this room with the 4 chairs and be able to project. And that bar underneath the screen has a camera in it, so it all integrates wirelessly with your laptop.
Right. In terms of the cost when you're doing these renovations, what is sort of the breakout, or at least a general range between what they actually sort of do in furniture and reconstruction and the technology that needs to go in now to satisfy? It sounds like we have a lot more cameras, a lot more Zoom stuff, a lot more monitors that everybody needs when you're, when we're doing these, when we're doing the video calls.
So most of the technology, the prices have come down immensely, just like buying TVs at your house. It used to be $1 million to get a 50 TV, and now they're $500. So that technology is inexpensive. Where it gets expensive is when you have the rooms with the folding partitions, because it has to operate as 2 independent rooms and 1 room, which means it needs a controller, and that gets expensive. But these individual Zoom rooms, it's almost amazing people don't put a little bit of money into them to try to get people back in the office because it's cheap to do. You know, you can set up a room like this with technology for a couple $1,000s with a sound bar with an integral camera that has a wireless ability to click in. So yeah, but the big rooms, when we get into folding partitions, there's both the technology piece and then there's a steel beam up above the ceiling holding up that partition.
Oh, yeah, right. Yes.
So all of those things together, we had to do this for a project recently. You know, you're over $50,000 just to start talking about dividing a room. So
That's like those of us that dream of like, oh, I'm going to have this wall of glass that opens up in my house, and then you go to price it out. You're like, no, I'm not going to have a wall of glass. That was a lovely thought, but it's too much, right? Not going to happen.
Yes.
So talk to us about some of the trends maybe that not necessarily that you have tried, but that people have gone into post-pandemic, and that it's just really not, we're starting to realize it doesn't work.
I think we talked about it a little bit. The biggest thing that doesn't work is dictating the whole plan from a hierarchical point of view to say everybody needs to be back in the office on Tuesday or Wednesday. We've seen that be less successful. I think in terms of trend wise, the biggest thing is to try to start and do something, because it's never going to be 100% perfect the first time, but you can start to see what works, you know, by setting up this office with a variety of rooms. Now they're sort of keeping track of which ones are more popular, so that if they have one type that's booked all the time, we can swap it out and make that 2 of the rooms or 3 of the rooms. So sort of live beta testing.
Yeah, exactly what I was gonna say. I heard that. I've over and over, I've heard people use that as the software analogy, you know, where you sort of get out the minimal viable product, like get something out there, let people use it, and then go back in and change it. And it sounds like from what you said previous, at least start with some comfortable Zoom rooms so you can pull people out of their home offices to get in there. And then it sounds like, I mean, kitchen redesign sound like it's kind of expensive, but it seems what we always say in our consulting is if everybody's already out of the office, and if you spend money on offsites and things like that and restaurants and doing like, bring them back in with these kitchens that can either have catering, food brought in or whatever. And that's where you do the happy hours, because you can do the happy hour in the office now if you've got the right setup, and you don't need to send everybody out because nobody was in to begin with. Right.
Yes.
So
yeah,
would you say
happy hour in the office is very popular. We just did a space that had a speakeasy in it because they wanted a different type of space, but again, something for collaboration. So I thought that was interesting that they identified a speakeasy as one of their wish list items.
I've seen that too. Again, people putting in these like building these little bars and stuff so that people can hang out after work. I have a question, and I didn't see it on the floor plan, and maybe it's not there anymore. Maybe this is another thing going by the way of the cubicle, but I don't see any ping pong tables or any of that stuff anymore. Is that
not on that plan? But we did do one recently, sort of a game room with a foosball table and a ping pong table. Again, people are looking for social activities in the office to engage, and we're always open to more ideas. If anybody has any other ideas for things they'd like to see in the office, that's one of our favorite questions to ask. So
interesting. And people are using them, or I guess maybe, right? So
people are using them. I think people use the non-office type rooms now far more than they used to. Because for a long part of my career, I felt like we were building all these really cool spaces and everybody was supposed to be sitting in their office with their head down. And now that's really changed, management strategy wise and office culture wise.
You're absolutely right, because even if most people, like the only place to sit was like in the lobby or like when you first walked in, and it did feel a little bit weird. Why are these 2 people sitting in the lobby having a conversation? Right. But that was, there's sort of precursors of that. I almost forgot. I'm glad you said that we've talked about usage. I hear a lot of people bringing in firms to employ sensors and other things to actually figure out how is the space used. So on top of like how many people are coming in during the day, but actually once in the space, does that literal space get used? Does that little, Zoom room get used or whatever? Are people asking for that? And how long, if someone uses these kinds of sensors, is that, something you do sort of in the initiation, phase, and then you phase them out, or like what's going on with all of that sensors?
We've done sensors a couple of times on projects to monitor space usage. There's a human version of sensors, which is just counting. We've had architects and planners involved in trying to assess by monitoring the office for a few days. And then the biggest data that we get that we trust is the card swipes for everybody that's come through the doors of the office, because that's real-time data on who was in and how many days, and were they there for 4 hours or were they there for 8 hours, or just in terms of office occupancy, not in terms of scrutiny from management. So,
and I've also heard, because we're big believers in surveys as well in the beginning of engagement with the client to figure out what people want and how they're going to use the space. We read a lot though that many people with their intention of using these spaces and say yeah because they're gonna they're figuring out that formula to figure out how many desks they need. It hasn't really worked out to what people's intentions were, and that more and more people keep saying, I still overestimated the number of desks I needed. And like you said, they needed more, they need more of the social spaces. So somebody that's on the call today, if they were looking to start something, would you agree with that? Would you agree that we're still over planning on the desks?
I think we're still way over planning. I mean, I think it's unrealistic to estimate that 90% of your office population is going to be in on a given day. Even when they say all hands, everybody in, that's a big number. We were at occupancy levels, I think the number was like 40% pre-COVID in terms of how much percentage wise an individual office got used. So it's way less than that now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that we're over planning. I also think it's a difficult thing to do, because you want your staff to feel welcome. You want them to feel like they have a spot in the office to come. And you have to define that, I think, in terms of what staff is expecting. And we talked a little bit about having the most successful projects that we run are when we have a company leader that's fired up about change and trying to get people back in the office, and they disseminate that energy to the management team, who then get the staff on board. And it's a process, but if we can engage with at least a portion of the staff during the design process, like we did with Ocean Conservancy, they listen. We had calls with 50 people where we were flagging, we like the blue, we like this type of chair. And I think that giving people a voice in the process really does help. So
yeah. Well, which I think was the biggest problem we had with the whole return to work, is nobody really listened. Everybody immediately thought we were sort of going back to the old days. And I am stunned at how quickly that is not happening. Like, we're not going there. And I'm stunned, in the work that we do. I mean, it was only a little while ago that a lot of our consulting was prepping for the return to office. And now a lot of the work that we do is our return to office failed because of space wise. Now, you know what I mean? Like, just in a couple of months. And so, now we're into the whole, it's about the purpose. If you haven't figured out the purpose of why people want to come in and what they want to do, and again, and hopefully we've gotten across this in the call, and we say this all the time now, is survey after survey, social is the #1 reason, next to, followed by cohesion with my team members. So you got to be getting rid of some of these desk spaces and making that more social for people. So hopefully that will work. And Colleen, also what you said about leadership, I think you're dead on correct there. You're right. People whose leaders come out and say, here's what we're going to do, and we're listening, and we're going to go forward, and to admit that you're not going to get it right the first time, but we're going to do that our best, and to communicate that and be transparent seems to me is the winning formula for moving forward in this future of work, even though it's changing rapidly. I mean, this is really, it's stunning when you think about it now. The conversation we are having is, how can I get people to come into the office, right? I mean, and it's, the days are, with the tight labor market, even with the recession may or may not be coming on, it's still tight. We still have a lack of highly skilled knowledge workers. So the idea that you can order people back in without sort of using a little bit of a carrot is not, it's just not there, right? And space is, and as somebody said too, it's like space doesn't create culture, but space creates behavior, and space fosters different behavior, and behavior creates culture too, despite the way we, in addition to the way we treat each other. So don't think that space isn't critically important.
Yeah, we see this space as sort of the body language for culture. So
yeah.
how the organization operates, it can be really helpful or it can detract.
Right. Well, and then think about that walking, if you're a job prospect or you've got a new hire coming in to see the bench, the bench seating,
Benching.
Or see a cubicles, right? Or versus social spaces with sofas. One says we foster and believe in collaboration, right? And the other one is just feels like heads down, get to work, right? Doesn't even feel right anymore, right?
No.
Well, this has been great. We're going to open it up. I know people have done questions. I'm going to move one slide over, and then if anybody has any questions, let us know. I know that we've answered a bunch, and we had some questions early on. I'm just going to go right here if I can find it. And again, just in terms of getting started, what kind of budgets do you think people need to play? I know it's hard, square footage and stuff like that, but give us a range that we could sink our teeth into. Is that possible?
There's a lot of furniture on the market. We have another nonprofit client that's a big environmental group, and we help them buy. They called it used furniture at first. We're not calling it that because it was barely used by another company that closed their office during COVID. So recycled, repurposed furniture really inexpensively. And a lot of times we had a walkthrough last week where we're moving a group, and we can pull pieces from their existing inventory and furniture and layout and maybe put them together differently in different configurations in different rooms and reuse things that people already have.
And what about panels and panelization? So if I don't have the budget to move walls, but I want to create separate spaces and define them, is that also easy to find on the secondary market?
Absolutely. And there's a ton of I wouldn't say secondary market, but like individualized Zoom solutions, almost like booths that different furniture companies are selling now that are set up with everything already plug and play, fairly inexpensively. And the benefit there is you don't need permits, and there's a whole level that you skirt around with the
I've seen like 2 people booths, or like, where it's, it's basically like a little bit of a picnic table, and they're these modular things that come in and they've got them lined up against the walls. And that's where, literally they look like 2 people telephone booths.
Yes.
Interesting. And so that's a lot of stuff available online, or is that stuff that locally in the cities, or where do you see this sort of inventory?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of furniture vendors that carry solutions for that, and there are things online for sale as well.
Oh, perfect. Appreciate it. Well, thank you, Colleen. This was so exciting. I'm so glad we finally got to do this with you. Your spaces are beautiful. That kitchen looks like a place that I would want to work, especially for those of us that pop up laptops in kitchen. Why wouldn't you go to that one? Right? So it's really good. So appreciate it. Thank you, and good luck with all of your work and helping us all move forward in our spaces. We like that, very nice. And thanks all of you that are on the call. We do have, there's Colleen's email there if you'd like to get some information about maybe how that she can help you. You can see our email there as well, my email for A Church. And then if you wouldn't mind, there's a QR code. If you could take a picture of that and scan that and take an evaluation for the webinar. And also, if you're here for your CAE credits, that will help guide you to figure out how you get your CAE credits. And we'll give you back a little bit of time today. We got what, 6 minutes? Hurrah for us, right? In a busy work schedule. So thanks everybody. Appreciate so much for you guys turning in again. Thank you, Colleen, for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.